I never thought I'd be that person, the one who checks their spouse's phone. 20 years of marriage built on trust, and there I was, heart pounding as my trembling fingers swiped through Richard's emails. The bedroom felt suddenly cold despite the summer heat outside our Manhattan penthouse. Meeting with Stevens confirmed for Thursday. Divorce papers ready for preliminary review. My stomach twisted into knots. Stevens, Richard's longtime attorney. The same man who'd been at our wedding, who'd drafted our wills, who'd helped us establish our family trust. I set the phone down carefully as if it might explode, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The city lights blurred through my tears. 20 years. 2 children now in college. A fortune we'd built together from the tech company we started in our garage. $500 million, countless properties, art collections, investments, all about to be divided. Or so Richard thought. Looking back, the signs had been there for months. Richard's late nights at the office. The mysterious weekend business trips. The way he'd grown distant, irritable whenever I mentioned our upcoming anniversary trip to Japan. I'd blamed it on stress from our company's upcoming IPO. How naive I'd been. I poured myself a glass of water, hands still shaking. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about survival. Richard had always been the public face of our company, MindMatrix Technologies. I was the coding genius, the product architect who preferred to stay behind the scenes. Only our closest business associates knew I'd written the algorithm that had revolutionized artificial intelligence processing. Mom? You okay? My daughter Sophie's face appeared on my phone screen. Her weekly video call from Stanford. I quickly wiped my eyes. Perfect timing, sweetheart. Just thinking about some code. I forced a smile. You always say that, she laughed. When are you and Dad coming for Parents' Weekend? Jake's flying in from MIT too. We wouldn't miss it, I promised, already wondering if we'd still be married by then. After we hung up, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Richard, not yet. I needed time to think, to plan. The next morning, I called Patricia Chen, my personal attorney. We'd been friends since law school before I dropped out to pursue computer science. While Richard had Stevens, I'd always kept Patricia as my independent counsel, something Richard had found unnecessary but had eventually accepted. I need to meet you today. It's urgent, I said, keeping my voice steady. 3 hours later, in her downtown office with views of the Hudson River, I laid everything out. The emails. The meeting with Stevens. The signs I'd ignored. Patricia's expression remained professional, but I caught the flash of anger in her eyes. She'd been at our wedding too. Before we discuss next steps, there's something you should know, she said, pulling out a thick folder. Remember the founders' agreement you and Richard signed when you started MindMatrix? I nodded. It was standard legal protection we'd put in place before our first round of funding. There's a clause you insisted on. Section 12, paragraph 4. She slid the document across her desk. You were worried about someone stealing your algorithm, so you added this intellectual property protection. I scanned the paragraph, memory flooding back. The clause stated that in the event of any attempt to seize control of the company's core technology without proper board approval, ownership of all related patents would revert exclusively to the original creator, me. Richard never cared about the technical details, I murmured. He probably forgot this existed. Patricia smiled slightly. Or never fully understood its implications. Over the next 3 days I gathered evidence. Not just of Richard's divorce plans, but of something far more disturbing. Hidden in encrypted files on his private server, which he didn't know I could access, were plans to push me out of the company entirely once our divorce was finalized. Richard had been meeting with our biggest competitor, Globetech Industries. He'd drawn up plans to sell them my algorithm after gaining full control through the divorce. The projected payout, $1.2 billion, all for him. This isn't just about your marriage, Patricia said grimly as we reviewed the documents in a private room at her firm. He's attempting corporate theft. We assembled a small, trusted team. Patricia's best corporate litigator, a forensic accountant, a cybersecurity expert, and my old coding partner Miguel, who still worked for MindMatrix. The plan was simple but required perfect timing. First, secure my assets. Second, document Richard's conspiracy with Globetech. Third, invoke the hidden clause before Richard could execute his plan. What about the children? I asked, staring at my wedding ring. This will destroy their relationship with their father. Patricia squeezed my hand. Better they know the truth than live with a lie. Moving $500 million isn't as simple as transferring money between accounts. Much of our wealth was tied up in company stock, real estate, and various investments. Some were joint assets, others were solely in my name. The forensic accountant, Ms. Patel, had identified $218 million in assets that were undisputedly mine, investments I'd made with money from my family inheritance and patents I'd secured before marriage. These need to be protected immediately, Ms. Patel advised. Based on the emails we've recovered, Richard plans to freeze all your accounts next Tuesday. We had 4 days. I authorized the transfer of my clear-cut assets to new, secure accounts. The remaining joint assets would need to wait for court proceedings, but at least my personal fortune was protected. That night, I returned home and acted as if nothing had changed. Richard and I ate dinner together, discussing Sophie's upcoming tennis tournament and Jake's research project. He mentioned a business dinner the following evening. With Stevens? I asked casually, taking a sip of wine. His fork paused midway to his mouth. How did you? Yes, some contract issues for the IPO. His lie hung between us like a wall. I smiled and asked about dessert. A week after discovering Richard's plans, everything was in place. Richard had no idea I'd moved my assets or discovered his scheme with Globetech. I documented everything, created secure backups of my algorithm's original code, and prepared the legal paperwork to invoke the hidden clause. That morning, Richard kissed me goodbye as he left for what he thought was the final planning meeting with Stevens before filing for divorce. Instead, he walked into a conference room filled with our company's board members, Patricia and me. His face drained of color when he saw me sitting at the head of the table. What's going on? He demanded, his confident facade cracking slightly. I stood, calm despite my racing heart. Please sit down, Richard. We have some matters to discuss regarding your meetings with Globetech. The board members looked confused. Patricia distributed folders containing evidence of Richard's conspiracy, emails, meeting transcripts, proposed contracts for selling my algorithm. This is ridiculous, Richard snapped, but his voice wavered. I've done nothing wrong. Section 12, paragraph 4 of our founders' agreement, I said quietly. Read it. As the implications dawned on the board members, the room erupted in questions. Richard attempted to defend himself, claiming I'd violated his privacy, that the evidence was fabricated. The IP authentication timestamps and blockchain verification prove otherwise, said Miguel, our technical witness. These plans have been in development for over 6 months. That confrontation changed everything, not just for me but for our entire industry. The board voted unanimously to remove Richard as CEO. Under the founders' agreement, all his shares related to my algorithm reverted to me, effectively transferring control of 61% of the company into my hands. Globetech faced a federal investigation for attempted corporate espionage. 3 of their executives resigned within weeks. Richard's carefully constructed world collapsed around him. While he retained significant wealth from his other investments, he lost what he valued most: his reputation and position in the tech world. Our divorce proceeded, but on vastly different terms than he'd planned. Without leverage over the company, his attempt to claim credit for my work fell apart. The courts awarded me full ownership of my intellectual property and a fair division of our joint assets. The children were devastated initially. I showed them only what they needed to see: evidence of their father's infidelity but not the corporate conspiracy. That burden wasn't theirs to bear. Did you always suspect? Sophie asked me one evening as we walked along the beach near our Malibu home, 6 months after the divorce was finalized. No, I admitted. I trusted him completely. Then how did you protect yourself so well? That clause in your agreement, it's like you knew. I stopped, watching the sunset paint the ocean gold. I didn't protect myself from your father. I protected my work because it mattered to me. The lesson isn't about distrust, Sophie. It's about valuing what you create. 1 year after discovering Richard's betrayal, I stood on stage at the Women in Technology Summit, addressing 5,000 young women engineers, programmers, and entrepreneurs. Protection isn't just about contracts and clauses, I told them. It's about recognizing your worth, documenting your contributions, and building networks of support. MindMatrix had transformed under my leadership. We'd launched the IPO Richard had planned, but with a fundamentally different structure. One that protected intellectual property creators with unprecedented clarity and compensation. We'd established the Creators Defense Fund, providing legal resources to women and minorities in tech whose work was being appropriated without proper credit or compensation. In its first year, the fund had already helped 28 innovators reclaim their rightful ownership. Sophie had switched her major to computer science and law, a combination she said was inspired by watching me navigate both worlds. Jake had started an ethics and technology group at MIT that was gaining national attention. Richard? Last I heard, he'd moved to Singapore working as a consultant for startups. We spoke only through attorneys, and his relationship with our children remained strained but was slowly healing. Sometimes at night, I still wake up wondering how I missed the signs for so long. But then I remember that trust isn't weakness, betrayal is. I didn't fail by believing in my marriage. Richard failed by betraying it. My $500 million decision wasn't really about money. It was about standing up for myself, protecting what I'd built, and refusing to be erased from my own success story. The hidden clause that saved me wasn't just an illegal document, it was in discovering my own strength when everything I believed in collapsed. It was finding that beneath the shock and heartbreak was a woman who knew her value and refused to let anyone diminish it. I don't regret checking Richard's phone that night. Some would call it an invasion of privacy, but I call it self-preservation. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest freedom. Today, as CEO of MindMatrix, majority shareholder and founder of the Creators Defense Fund, I no longer hide in the background. My name and contributions are recognized throughout the industry. More importantly, I've created a pathway for others to protect what they create. That's the true fortune I've built, not measured in dollars but in lives changed and voices amplified. Justice didn't just prevail in my story, it became my mission. And if Richard taught me anything valuable in our 20 years together, it was this: always read the fine print. You never know when a hidden clause might save everything that matters. 5 years after that fateful night, I sit in my home office, watching the sun rise over Central Park. The same view, but everything else has changed. MindMatrix has become the industry leader in ethical AI development. Our technology now powers systems that detect early signs of cancer, predict climate change patterns, and make education accessible in regions previously untouched by modern learning tools. The Creators Defense Fund has expanded to 15 countries, with legal teams specializing in intellectual property protection for underrepresented groups. We've recovered over $2 billion in stolen or undercompensated innovations. Sophie graduates next month with her dual degree and has already established a legal tech startup focused on algorithm authentication. Jake leads our research division, ensuring our technology never crosses ethical boundaries. As for me, last year I met Daniel, a widowed professor of ethics and technology. We connected at a conference where we were both speaking. Him on the philosophical implications of AI, me on protecting the humans behind the code. Our relationship moves at its own pace, built on respect and transparency above all else. I finger the small velvet box in my desk drawer. Inside is a pendant, not a diamond but a small USB drive cast in platinum. Engraved on it is the first line of code I ever wrote. Daniel gave it to me on our 6-month anniversary with a note: "Your work changed the world. Never let anyone diminish that." My phone chimes with a message from Patricia, now the chairperson of our corporate board. "Senate committee approved the Creators' Rights Act. Your testimony made the difference." I smile, remembering standing before Congress 3 months ago, sharing a simplified version of my story and advocating for stronger protections for innovators. The legislation, once fully implemented, will make it harder for powerful executives to exploit those who actually create the technology that changes our world. What happened to me won't easily happen to others. And that, more than the $500 million I managed to protect, more than the company I now lead, more than the personal happiness I've reclaimed, that is my true legacy. Sometimes justice isn't just about winning your own battle. Sometimes it's about changing the battlefield itself, so others don't have to fight as hard as you did. I close my laptop and prepare for my day, no longer looking over my shoulder, no longer second-guessing my worth. Richard's betrayal gave me something unexpected: freedom to become fully myself. And that is a fortune beyond measure.